Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here today with me and Melinda for the Entrepreneurs in a Game podcast. I met Melinda recently. We're part of the same mastermind, and I was very, very excited to have her on this show today because she is a very, very inspirational lady. She's full of wisdom and ideas. She's got creativity just popping out of her. And I'm so excited to have her on today so she can share her wisdom about how you can grow your courage, your confidence to have a really amazing business. Melinda is a strategy coach. She works with creative entrepreneurs, taking them on a journey that she's been on herself. She went from being a total startup to creating 3 six-figure businesses. Her gift is identifying the strengths within an entrepreneur and their business proposition and finding creative ways to leverage their strengths so they can grow their business in a joyful way. Melinda, welcome to the Entrepreneurs in a Game podcast, and thank you for being here.
Lovely to be here, Nina.
Melinda, you have such an incredible story, and it will probably take several hours. You could write a book about what you've been through and the courageous action you've taken to grow your businesses. But could you just give us some of the highlights?
Well, first of all, I could write a book and I've already pre-sold it. I've just got to write it.
I can believe that.
Well, the highlights. I mean, I think I should start with the struggle because that's probably most relevant. So I come from a middle-class background. I found myself, I come from a background where women, got to note my age, but I come from a background where women weren't really expected to work. They were expected to do something until some poor man came along to support them. This was basically it. And I did this. I followed suit, had 3 children in 2 years, and then left my husband before he could do any more damage. And then found myself with no money, 3 kids to support, and absolutely no idea as to how one moved forward. Because to me, work, I'm really fascinated by the fact that nowadays there's this huge emphasis on following your passion in order to create your business. But for me, I didn't actually have any choice. I'd left school at 14. I had no qualifications. I could type. And I remember sitting down writing a list, and I could knit and I could type. And I could write letters. And I think those were my 3 key skills. And from that, I started a knitwear company, which went worldwide. Then I went into PR. And then I started writing books on knitwear and crafts because, really, this was all I could do. And I ended up writing 30 books, quite a few of which were international bestsellers, but these were all coffee table craft books. And I then was in Australia and saw somebody making handmade soap. And I took, I had what I call a ding moment, and my life is full of ding moments. And I came back to the UK and started making soap and ended up with the biggest handmade soap company in the UK. And then realized that all these journeys that I'd taken had a greater value than what I'd actually done. So I learned very early on that the journey is more valuable than the product that you're trying to sell. And I realized that the experiences that I'd had in growing those businesses and all the encounters that I had, if I could share those with people, I could really help people to grow their own businesses. And that's what I did. And that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years.
Fantastic. And did you have fear when you started creating these businesses? If you had fear, what did you do with it? How did you handle it? How did you get past that?
Well, I think when you have nothing to lose to some extent.
True.
And because my background, work for women, was play and no more than that, everything I did with joy. I explored things that I wanted to explore, but I had a talent for turning those into money. So, I come from an entrepreneurial background. So I would come up with a creative idea and I would um, find the strategy. I love making ideas work. That's what really turns me on. So if I had a fear, it was around not being good enough because I didn't have an education. But I think confidence has probably been my biggest strength. And that actually came from not having anything to lose. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense. And when you had to start creating a living for you and your children, did you naturally have get up and go, or did you have to try and find that from somewhere?
I found raising children has been the biggest challenge in my life. I'm not a natural mother. I should never have had children. My children will tell you I should never have had children. I'm very close to them now, but that was probably my hardest battle. But I've always followed, how can I put it? I've always been totally focused on turning an idea into something, seeing how far I could run with an idea. So while because my focus was so strong, I could always make it happen. There was no question that it wasn't going to happen. I would do whatever it took to make it successful.
And you said something really important there, your focus was strong.
Yes.
And when you have a strong focus, then nothing's going to stop you. So
absolutely.
And for people who don't have a strong focus, or people who are listening to this call who don't have that, how do they get a strong focus? Because that's the beginning of everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, you have to decide what you want. So you have to start at the end. You have to start with your end game. My end game was to have, actually, it was never big enough, but it was always to have enough so that I wouldn't have to worry. And I created structures around me to create that scenario. So, for example, I knew that I needed X amount of money to get through a month. So I would rent out rooms in my house. I would do small things that would create some income. And I would actually work to a plan. And then I would allow myself a certain amount of time each day to do the things that I'd identified I needed to do to take my business forward. So I think it's about eating an elephant. You do things one bite at a time, but you have to prioritize, and you also mustn't get lost in. As soon as you get lost in your own fears, you're lost. So you have to action. You have to action things every day. A little bit every day can take you a long way.
And you said that your brilliance is about turning an idea into something, into making it work.
Yes.
Can you talk about how you do that? Because that's fascinating. I love the way you do that, and I've seen that, how you do that in your own work.
Yeah.
And you how you do that with your clients as well. But could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's about having your antennae up the whole time. And that's when you meet people, that's when you read things, that's when you watch television, that's when you're walking down the street. It really is about having your antennae up and being totally open and awake to what's going on around you. Because I think what happens if you're running a business, you become incredibly myopic, and you tend to look at the detail and you get lost in the detail and you get lost in the overwhelm that the daily tasks around running a business can trap you in. And it's really, really important that you step outside that. And as I say, you're open to ideas and then you leverage things. So, to give you an example of that, I'm thinking that I'm looking for ideas of craft books to write. I'm in an Australian market. I see people making soap, and I have what I call a ding moment. And I think when you're running your own business, and I think most people have a huge amount of talent, and if you couple that talent with the advantages that you have today with the internet, and the fact that you can reach millions and millions of people, which not many people really take on board. The idea that you can't make large amounts of money using your talent is unconscionable to me. The gifts that we have out there that we can leverage are phenomenal. So you asked me for an example of how I do it. I think most people, because they're in overwhelm or because they're so involved with the detail, cannot see what's at the end of their nose. And if you look at it from the outside and you look at somebody's skills, their businesses, how they're operating, for me, it's really easy from the outside to see what that person should be doing. And that's taking into account their personal strengths and weaknesses, and also what they've achieved so far in the business, what they've been great at, what they haven't been great at, and working out how to use those strengths best. And it's I don't know, it's a gift, but it drops down to me from the sky. I can be talking to someone and I will get a vision, and that's what I will talk to them about. And the number of times I've watched eyes light up as something so obvious that people just haven't seen is extraordinary. And that's why I do this. I mean, it's that, because to me, to be able to do that is just brilliant, to be able to actually clarify something for people.
And I've seen you do that in action, and it's very, very exciting to see you work. My two favorite words for entrepreneurs are courage and confidence. And we talk ourselves into feeling that we don't have the courage to put our actions out there, to make ourselves visible, to put our offers out to the world. And we could talk ourselves into this and not actually do that. And that means we don't grow our business. So for you, could you say something about confidence, courage, and how entrepreneurs who believe they don't actually possess those at the moment, how they can grow their confidence and their courage so they can start to grow their income?
Yeah, I think the word entrepreneur implies to some extent that you have to be prepared to take risks. And I think the bottom line is, if you're not going to die as a result of an action that you're going to take, that there is no risk. I mean, there really, really isn't a risk. Nobody is going to starve. You're not going to be homeless. And if you don't not taking a risk and not taking that step forward and jumping into the unknown, is really the danger. Being stagnant is the danger. So just take action. Just make leaps. If they don't work, learn from them. If they do work, the joy that you'll get from it having worked is just worth the risk. I mean, I did a coaching program some time ago that really changed my life, because I was quite hung up on my money story. I had a conscience about, if I had money, then somebody else didn't. Lots of really unhealthy attitudes around money. I've done a lot of work in Africa, a lot of poverty alleviation work. I never twigged that in order to really be valuable and to do good works, I had to have a solid foundation, and I had to have some sort of financial security. And I did one time I would earn a lot of money and I would spend it. There was no sort of security there. And I saw a coaching course, and a message came down to me that I needed to do this, and it was a great deal of money. And I put the whole lot on a credit card and did it, and it was actually a completely wiped my credit out. And it was actually the best thing I've ever done. And it was almost the action of taking that leap that meant it was going to work. If I hadn't had the courage to do it, I wasn't going to get anything from it. And I think that's really important. That's really how I've operated in life. I've taken some huge leaps, and they've not all worked out, but when they haven't, as I said, it's the journey that counts. And I've learned so much from the journey that I can distill into wisdom, that it's been worth it anyway. So you can't lose.
Yes, I agree. And made big leaps of faith myself and trusted that it was going to work. And more often than not, it does. It doesn't work every single time, but it's much, I think it's this way forward, isn't it? Rather than staying within yourself and staying in your own small comfort zone and hoping you'll figure it out or find a way of fixing it, it's actually reaching out and finding someone who can help you to take that big step forward, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? And sometimes it's more dangerous to stay in your comfort zone and play small than to go out there and start playing big and thinking big. And that's the joy about our journey, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, unless you get out of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow.
Yeah,
And unless
exactly.
unless you explore your growth, then nothing's going to change. So if you're comfortable with that, then that's fine. But if we're here once, we really owe it to ourselves to explore what we're capable of as human beings and what we can give and what we can get and what we can create. And you cannot do that within your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And as a strategy coach, what's the biggest tip you can share with our listeners about their business, about growing their business, about growing their vision of what's possible for them?
Okay. I think, first of all, you have to be incredibly honest with yourself in understanding what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And you have to understand that to grow any business, you need to delegate your weaknesses. Your weaknesses might be around something really important. For example, business is actually about making money. If you haven't got a grip on your numbers, your figures, your records, you might need to outsource that. Don't ignore it. Outsource it. So it's about recapping on all the successes that you've had and how those have come about, and leveraging them. Leverage is a big word for me. And I think if I was to do it again, there's lots of times where I've reached a point where I thought, I've done everything I can in this industry. I'm bored. I'm going to walk away and try something else. Whereas I haven't actually fully leveraged that situation. So, for example, if someone's selling product or a coaching program and it doesn't quite work, they will often just walk away from it. It will floor them. They will just walk away from it. Whereas if you revisit it and you look at it from a different view, and you identify why it hasn't worked and what you could do to make it better, and then run with it again, the chances are it will work. So I think people often give up too soon on things. And it's also working from a solid foundation. So it's understanding all the pieces, the practical pieces that you need to cover while you're building your business, to ensure that you're working from a solid foundation. I think some people often just go out and wing it and then fall flat on their faces because they haven't done the underlying work. And that's the personal work as well as the practical work.
You said that you have, you're very creative. You have lots of creative ideas. Is creative something that we're born with creativity, or is it something that we can learn to be as business owners? Because for myself, I do struggle creatively coming up with creative ideas.
I'm not sure that you can learn it. I can't answer that question. You probably can. But I think if you recognize you're not, there are a million, again, we have the whole world that we can reach. And if your antennae are up, you can identify people who are, and you can leverage their skills. I mean, we go into business often thinking that we're supposed to know everything, and we don't. We're very limited in what we know. And if we recognize that and we understand the bits outside of our own skills that we have to draw in to make our business work, and then we take a leap of faith and employ people to bring those skills to our business, then we have a chance of growing that business. And also, I mean, if you want to build a business, it's actually quite important that you have a team support for lots of reasons, especially if you want to sell it at the end. But other than that, to take the pressure off. We should only do what we're good at.
Yes, focus on those things, because that's going to earn us the most income, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what about, I'm really interested when you say have your antenna up. Do you mean set an intention? For example, you want to solve a particular problem in your business, and you set the intention that you're going to find the answer to that. Is that what you mean about having your
Well,
antenna up?
let me give you an example. When I was in my knitting days, and I just started knitting and going into shops and selling my jumpers. I mean, absolute basic stuff. My 7-year-old son came home from school and said, "Could I make him a jumper that squeaked?" And I said, what do you mean a jumper that squeaks? So he said, "I want a jumper with a big foot on it, and you press the foot and it squeaks. So with a head underneath it." And I thought, and then I thought, well, you could. So the antennae went up, and I thought, well, there's an idea there somewhere. It's not the idea that he's given me, but it was there somewhere. And what I actually did was I created kids' jumpers with pockets inside that you could slot a squeaker in. But instead of a big foot and a head, I put teddy bears on them. So you press the teddy bear's tummy and it squeaked. Well, I mean, that started my knitwear business. I sent them off to the Daily Express. What could happen? They could say no. We don't like them. What's the worst that could happen? And they did a half-page spread offering these jumpers by mail order. I then had to run around and find people who could make them for me. So I went to Camden Lock and I found machine knitters, and I got, so it's kind of his little comment. My antennae were up. I'm looking for ideas. I want to be open to ideas. So it was about somebody saying something that triggers a thought pattern that can improve or go into your business model. We had a guy from university, a soap business, soap factory. We were so entrenched in our the way we were doing things. We were almost institutionalized. We built this system. We thought it was working. We had one problem, and that was that our soaps had rough edges, and we couldn't work out how to cure this. And a guy came down from a university, and he worked out that if we ran a scraper over these slabs of soap as we were cutting them, before we cut them, it would solve that problem. Now that thought saved us tens of thousands of pounds in labor and time. And it was just one thought. Yeah. So that's kind of what I mean by antennae. It's being open to opportunities the whole time.
And then following through with them rather than
just following through with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yes, definitely.
So it always comes up, you have your antennae up, you get an idea, and then you follow through with it. You take the action.
Now, if you're a person that has a lot of creative ideas, because this often happens, you have so many ideas that you don't know which one to follow or what to do. Lots of brilliant thoughts around what you could do. I was at a motivational talks many years ago with Simon Woodruff, who's the guy who owns Yo Sushi. And he said that if you've got an idea, sit on it for 2 weeks. Don't do anything about it for 2 weeks. If it's still fresh at the end of 2 weeks, then start exploring it. And that made a lot of sense to me. I mean, that was something that I've kind of followed, because to stop myself going back and trying to do something with this idea and further complicating my business, that was a really valid lesson that he taught there.
That's a really great point that he made. I know there's a wonderful story about you writing to the Queen.
Oh, yes.
But please, could you share that with our listeners? This is an absolute gem.
Yeah, no, I was doing PR, and I was working mainly, how did I get into PR? Knitting and needlework, and I'd written all these books, and I was getting a lot of press. A lot of people were writing about me, and I built contacts with all the editors on the various, the needlework and craft editors on all the various magazines. And then someone from a spinning company, a yarn company, said to me, "How about you come and work for us as a consultant and promote our yarns, and we'll pay you in what turned out to be a huge sum of money to get us the press that you get for yourself." Now, what you didn't realize was the amount of money they were offering me was twice as much as I was earning in my business. Right. That's when I got the ding moment about what you know and the journey that you've been on can be worth more than actually what you're selling. So I started doing PR. And it was all knitting and craft people and companies. And I was doing some PR for a needlework magazine. And they wanted to find a way to promote British needlework. And I picked up on the internet, antennae up, that at the White House, every year they have Christmas trees. And they invite craftspeople to make decorations for the Christmas trees. And they have a reception with all these beautiful handmade ornaments on the trees. And I thought, well, perhaps we could do that. Perhaps we could organize a national competition, get people to embroider ornaments. And what we need to do is find a Christmas tree that's prominent in the UK and, do a big press thing around it. So I thought, well, where is there a prominent Christmas tree? And I thought, well, the Queen's got one. She has her speech in front of a Christmas tree at Buckingham Palace. So I wrote to the Queen. Dear Queen, dear Mom, dear Queen. And I suggested that I launch this competition and I get people all over the country making ornaments, and ultimately the ornaments could be auctioned for charity. And could I please use the tree at Buckingham Palace for this? And within 3 days, I had a letter back saying, what a lovely idea, which started a big snowball. I was living in the Welsh mountains at that time. I remember opening the letter that said, yes, please contact, what it actually said was, please contact, it was her press secretary, please contact the press secretary. And the first thing that went through my head was a book, a film, receptions, immediately contact my press secretary. And that's what I mean by antennae. And what came out of that was I got a celebrity charity involved, and we had 3 receptions at Buckingham Palace, and it was the whole royal family. It was my job to introduce the Queen to everyone. So there were 12 of us and the whole royal family. And then I got the tree in Selfridges, and I got it in the front of the V&A as well. So it was about starting with an absolute small idea and seeing how far you can take it. And the worst that could have happened in that scenario was she would have said no. And in fact, every bone in my body said she probably isn't going to go with this. But she said yes.
And it would have been so easy to have just sat on the idea, thought about it, and not done anything.
Yeah, absolutely. To start lower. You know yes. What the temptation most businesses is, oh, well, I'll put it in a store, or I'll have it in my church, in the community. I think the Queen. I start at the top because you can always come down. That's my motto in life. Start with the biggest, most glamorous possibility. And if that doesn't work, you can come down. It's very hard to start in a church hall and go up to the Queen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it takes courage to do that as well.
Why? You've got to write a letter.
Yes.
Why?
Yes.
That's it. In writing that letter, what did I have to lose?
Yeah, that's a really great way of thinking about it, which leads us on nicely for me to ask you, what's the number one mindset tip you can share with our listeners about how they can have that mindset so they can take big action?
I think never assume that anything is too big. Absolutely never, ever assume that you're not good enough. Never assume that, never look at what's going on around you and feel that people are cleverer than you or brighter than you or have more experience than you. Never compare yourself to anyone. Just go for it. Just take leaps. And I'm not suggesting that you mortgage your house, but we're in a world where a leap costs nothing these days because of the internet, and especially as a coach. People generally want to help you. Be creative in how you approach people. always consider other people's situations. So when you're approaching them, always look at it from their point of view. Look at what they can get out of it rather than what you can get out of it. And be kind. Be kind, be open, be authentic, and just take leaps.
And enjoy the process, because it's fun, isn't it, growing your business?
Absolutely. It's joyful.
Yes.
It really is. I mean, even when it doesn't work, learn from it. What did I do wrong? How can I tweak this? Because nothing is, as I say, if you put a program out there and it bombs, doesn't matter. You'll get it right the second time. But be analytical and be honest with yourself as to why it's bombed.
And in that way, you have nothing to lose, have you?
No, you never.
Fantastic. And Melinda, for our listeners who want to find out more about you and your work, how can they do that?
They can go to my website, my brand new sparkly website, which is www. Should I put it in the chat box?
Oh, yes, please. And we can make sure that link is there at the bottom of the podcast.
melindacossglobal.com. And there's actually a quiz on there which will talk about who you are, what sort of business person you are.
Yes, I've taken that quiz and it's very enlightening.
It's a bit fun. But you can find me on there. And I also, you can find me on there.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your wisdom. I could talk to you for hours about this. And for everyone who's been listening in, I know you'll have had so much value from Melinda and everything she's been sharing with us today. Thank you so much for being part of this, and look forward to being with you next time. Till then, bye-bye.